A man convinces thousands of strangers to buy a $1 stock. The company is basically worthless. Within months, the stock collapses. Millions of dollars disappear. The man behind it makes a fortune, serves just 22 months in prison, and later becomes a celebrity. That man is Jordan Belfort. And the strangest part of this story isn't the scam. It's that the world eventually turned it into entertainment. Because today, the same story that ruined thousands of investors became the blockbuster film The Wolf of Wall Street. People laugh, people quote the lines, some even admire the man behind it. But behind the parties, the yachts, and the Hollywood spotlight, there was a very real machine quietly taking money from ordinary people. And it all started in Queens. The 1960s. A loud, working-class neighborhood where most kids expected a pretty normal life, but one teenager was already thinking differently. One summer afternoon, he's standing behind a small cooler selling Italian ice. $2 each, he tells customers. Then he leans in and adds something clever. If you bring 3 friends, I'll give you a deal. Simple psychology. Create urgency. Make people feel like they're getting something special. By the end of that summer, he had made around $20,000 at 16 years old. That teenager was Jordan Belfort. For a brief moment, he tried the traditional path. He enrolled in dental school. On the very first day, the dean addressed the class. If you're here because you want to make a lot of money, you're in the wrong profession. Belfort didn't argue. He simply stood up and walked out. Because for him, the goal had always been crystal clear. Money. Lots of it, and fast. After college, he started a small business selling meat and seafood door to door. Yes, literally knocking on people's doors with frozen steaks. Ma'am, this is restaurant quality, cheaper than the grocery store. Surprisingly, the business grew quickly. At one point, he was doing around $100,000 a month in sales. But the operation was chaotic. Deliveries were late, products spoiled, bills piled up. Eventually, the business collapsed. Most people would have taken that as a warning, but Belfort learned something else from the experience. The product didn't matter. What mattered was the pitch. If you could control the conversation, you could sell almost anything. And that lesson eventually led him to Wall Street. In the late 1980s, he got a job at the brokerage firm L.F. Rothschild. For the first time, he saw the real world of finance. Phones ringing nonstop. Traders shouting across the room, millions of dollars moving every minute. It was fast, aggressive, addictive. But just a few months after he started, something dramatic happened. October 1987, Black Monday. The market crashed. Thousands of brokers lost their jobs, including Belfort. For most people, that would have been the end of their Wall Street career. But for Belfort, it revealed a loophole. Because outside the world of big banks and major stocks, there was another market. Penny stocks. Tiny companies trading for just a few cents or dollars. Almost no regulatory attention, almost no public scrutiny. But the commissions? Sometimes as high as 50%. Which meant if an investor bought $10,000 worth of stock, the broker could instantly make $5,000. Belfort realized he didn't need famous companies. He needed convincing stories. Soon he partnered with Danny Porish. Together, they built a brokerage firm with a powerful-sounding name, Stratton Oakmont. The name sounded prestigious, like an old, established Wall Street institution. But inside, the office looked more like a chaotic sales floor. Young brokers shouting into phones, desks packed tightly together, energy everywhere. Most of the employees had no financial background at all. Some were bartenders, some were mechanics, some had never worked in finance before. But Belfort didn't care about experience. He cared about hunger. And he trained them using a system he called straight-line persuasion. The concept was simple. Control the conversation. Push past hesitation. Guide the customer from hello to I'll buy it. Imagine the call. Mr. Johnson, I'm calling because we've identified a company that's about to explode. The investor hesitates. I've never heard of it. The broker responds instantly. That's exactly why this opportunity exists. Wall Street hasn't discovered it yet. The pressure continues, fast, confident, relentless. Eventually, the investor gives in. All right, I'll buy some shares. But behind the scenes, something very different was happening. Before those calls even started, Stratton Oakmont had already bought huge amounts of the same stock very cheaply. Then the brokers aggressively promoted it to investors. As hundreds of people bought in, the price went up. And while the investors were buying, the firm quietly sold its own shares at higher prices. This strategy is called a pump and dump. First, you pump the price using hype, then you dump your shares before reality catches up. The investors are left with the losses, the insiders walk away with the profits. By the early 1990s, Stratton Oakmont became extremely profitable. The office culture turned wild, lavish parties, luxury cars, expensive watches. At its peak, the firm employed more than 1,000 brokers and was moving billions of dollars in stock. But regulators were watching. Complaints from investors started piling up. Stocks promoted by the firm would skyrocket, then suddenly collapse. Investigators from the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission and the Federal Bureau of Investigation began building a case. Financial records were traced, phone calls were recorded, former employees started cooperating. Slowly, the empire unraveled. In 1999, Jordan Belfort pled guilty to securities fraud and money laundering. He was ordered to repay more than $100 million to victims, and he went to prison. But the story didn't end there. While in prison, Belfort began writing about his life, the parties, the scams, the rise and the fall. Those stories eventually became a memoir. And a few years later, Hollywood turned that memoir into a movie, directed by Martin Scorsese, starring Leonardo DiCaprio. The film became a global sensation. Audiences laughed, they cheered, some even admired the lifestyle. Meanwhile, many of the investors who lost money during the Stratton Oakmont years never recovered their savings, which raises an uncomfortable question. When the story of a financial scam becomes one of the most entertaining movies ever made, did the system really punish the fraud, or did it accidentally turn it into fame?